People who work in remote places, foresters, oil workers, and others. What creepy things have you encountered on watch? I worked at a Boy Scout summer camp. Every week, I had to lead a large group of teenagers into the wild to earn their wilderness survival badge. They had to build a shelter out of sticks, leaves, etc., and sleep there all night. The place was only a mile and a half from our main camp, but we guided the group on a circuitous route that made it seem like it was really in the distance. Anyway, one night all the guys had already organized their shelters. We cooked dinner and just sat around the campfire. It was getting late, around 11 at night, so I sent everyone to bed and started putting out the fire. Suddenly, there was a sound in the distance that sounded like church bells ringing. The sound was quite faint, but my partners and I could hear it clearly. It went on for 30 minutes, and the ringing itself sounded about every 30 seconds. We were all a little scared because there were no churches or towns within 20 miles of us. And after the bells stopped ringing, the singing began. It was not loud enough to make out the words, but it sounded like a church choir, only with more people and more enthusiasm. It was almost midnight at that point. The singing went on for over an hour. Sometimes it got quiet and we could barely hear it, and sometimes it got so loud that we thought it was about to be quite close. All the boys were very frightened, and I had to calm them down. I lied to them and told them that there was a church service going on at our main campground. Eventually, at almost 1 o'clock in the morning, the singing stopped. A few days later, I learned that there was a large KKK meeting that night, just a few miles away. They were the ones making all those noises. Late at night, working in the mine, I was changing a switch at a substation on the edge of the quarry. It was just me and the quiet room where the transformers were making a low noise. I finish the switch, head for the door, and see 3 pairs of red eyes staring out the window. I can't see anything else. Just darkness and 3 pairs of red eyes. Turns out goats like to stare out the windows. And at night, their eyes reflect the color red. I worked on oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico for years. And yes, it may not be something totally scary, but I was really scared. In the deep open ocean, the water is crystal clear and transparent, so you can watch the tuna and barracuda swimming around the rig, waiting for the onboard cook to dump food waste into the water. Every now and then, a great white shark would emerge from under the water and snatch a poor tuna with its mouth. And it took her literally fractions of a second to do it. Sharks are really scary. I've been working in northern Canada in the oil industry for several years now. There are some pretty creepy moments when you realize during a night shift that just a few minutes ago there was a moose behind a tree watching you for a while. Or when you find bear tracks that intersect with tracks you made 5 minutes ago. Honestly, the silence of a snowy forest in the dead of night also scares me. When there's not a soul within a 100-kilometer radius, you get really creeped out. And your only contact with the outside world is a radio channel that nobody gives a shit about. All this makes you feel very lonely. I once worked as a courier for a postal company. I often had to deliver packages to remote locations. One day, I arrived at a trailer park that barely fell within the boundaries of the designated delivery zone. It was dark, and there was very little lighting. I didn't shut off the engine, turn off the headlights and interior lights, and went to take the pizza out. When I got back and got in the car, I looked up and saw a creepy old man standing about a meter away from me. He just stood there and stared. It was like I had run into a screecher. I drove forward because I needed to make a U-turn to get out of the park. When I turned around, this old man was already standing in the middle of the road. I was startled for a second, and then I drove around him, looked in my rearview mirror, and saw him waving his arms, chasing me out of the parking lot. After that incident, I took 2 weeks of vacation. You reminded me of a scary incident I had when I was working as a courier. I was delivering groceries to the customers of a supermarket in England. Many of our customers lived in the middle of nowhere, And that time, there was an overnight order from a new customer that I had never traveled to before. Severely delayed after previous deliveries, I was still trying to find this house. It was already 10:30 p.m., and my shift was supposed to end at 10. As I was driving along the narrow country roads, I realized that there was nothing around me but dark fields and a patch of woods. I tried to find anything that looked like an access road. For miles and miles, I saw no cars or people. Then, suddenly, I heard a loud bang from the side of my van, as if something had been thrown at it. There were no trees or anything else around that something could have fallen from. Plus, it was a thump specifically on the side of the car. I looked in my mirrors and out the window, but saw nothing. Then it happened again. Another bang on the side of the van. I abruptly turned around and took off back to the supermarket. Told my boss I couldn't find that place. To be fair, I actually looked for about 30 minutes. There was no house at the address postcode given. A few years ago, in southeast Alaska, one early morning, I was sitting in a boat moored in a lonely, quiet cove. I came up for air to smoke, and suddenly heard the chiseled sounds of one wildebeest killing another wildebeest. This went on for probably 10 minutes. I know it's just a manifestation of nature, but man, I still can't get over that sound. It's imprinted in my head for a long time. I used to work in agriculture, 10 hours a day, dicking around in the field alone. A great many times I would hear the sound of running, I would freeze and try to locate the source, but I never found anything horrible. For a while, I was sure it was animals running in the thickets of trees. However, one day, a very strange thing happened to me when I heard a loud sound from the thicket of trees right next to me. I immediately collapsed to the ground to see the feet of an animal running by. But that time, too, I saw absolutely nothing. I remember trying to stay calm and walking very briskly to the jolt where I sat for quite some time. I never thought that something could scare me so much in the daytime. There wasn't a soul around, which made my imagination run wild and scared me even more. As a deer hunter, in the past, I can tell you that when squirrels come into the woods in packs, they can make such loud noises as if a herd of elephants were running. However, the surroundings may be completely silent, and you are unlikely to find them. I do a lot of different jobs around the woods. The creepiest case was finding headless pigeons. I've also found branches laid out in a circle and different symbols on trees in the same place. Not sure if it was all part of some ritual or not, but still, I've found altars, painted trees, pentagrams trampled on the ground, pentagrams made of ropes between trees. I don't give a shit if you're praying to Beelzebub or whatever the hell you're doing. Just don't litter and destroy wildlife. I was working as a field geologist in the outback about 12 hours north of Adelaide. One day, I was driving my truck and saw something that looked like a flagpole sticking out in the middle of the steppe. There wasn't a farm or anything nearby where there might be people, so I decided to drive up and check out what the hell it was. Turns out it was a dead dog, impaled with a spike along its entire body. Like, from ass to mouth. I took some pictures and asked my boss to call the police, but for the rest of my business trip I was still tense, thinking there was some kind of maniac in the area. Coincidentally, I have become such a creepy case of one man. I live on a ranch far off the highway, with a country road leading to us. Our neighbors, the nearest house is about 1.5 miles away if you go straight. We're having trouble with thieves ripping off their outbuildings like storage sheds, etc. It was winter, so the sun set pretty early. It was already dark by 6 p.m. To make a long story short, every time I saw a car coming down our road, I watched it, so they wouldn't stop on our property in case they did. One evening, I saw a car driving very slowly down the road and stopped at the end of our driveway, about 100 feet from our porch. A car parked right in front of my 60s pickup truck. I immediately thought that whoever it was might want to steal it, or just check out who lived in the area. Either way, I decided to put on my black coat, grabbed my rifle, and went out to scout the situation. It was dark outside, so I stayed away from the car headlights to get as close as possible. As I crept closer, I could definitely make out that it was a white van, but I couldn't see who or what was in the van. When we were about 20 meters apart, the van began to pull back and turn into our driveway. The headlights headed towards me, and I froze in the middle of the road. I immediately saw the FedEx logo on the side of the van. I guess there's no point in saying that the driver of the van was shitting himself when he saw a dark figure standing in the middle of a field in the dark and with a rifle in his hands. To my surprise, when I smiled and waved at him, he didn't freak out and kept driving up to the house. Afterward, I explained the whole situation to him and we both laughed. I had been working in the peatlands of Borneo for some time, studying wild orangutans. We would go out into the forest very early, around 4 a.m. One morning, we came across a smoky leopard on the trail we were following into the forest. He was just crouched down watching us. We shouted at him, tried to appear larger, and one of the locals we were working with pulled out his slingshot and shot him with a rock. He missed on purpose to scare him off. The leopard didn't move. It sat there for 5 minutes watching us, and then slowly walked off the trail into the thick thickets. As we passed by, I shined my flashlight where he had gone, and I could clearly see a pair of glittering eyes just 3 meters away from me. He was watching us walk by. It was eerie, but at the same time incredibly cool to see a member of an endangered species in person. In 2011, I was on combat duty at Camp Phoenix, on the outskirts of Kabul. My 12-hour shift started at 7 p.m. Around 2 a.m., I heard someone running up the steps of our guard tower. My hair immediately stood up, even on my butt. I put on my night vision device and started praying, hoping it was some kids wandered into the wrong place or something. Believe it or not. But fuck I will. There were 2 or 3 pairs of dogs fucking